From Golden Arrow Bonsai. Today we're shooting a video on collecting trees up in the mountains. We're going to look at some junipers first, and then we're going to look at some pine trees. Then we're going to look at some trees that can be collected, and we're going to look at a lot of trees that can't be collected. So why don't you come along with us and we'll see what we can find. Here's a beautiful little juniper. Look at this. Wouldn't that make a lovely bonsai? It's got dead wood that spirals around the trunk. It comes up, it loops around. Incredibly graceful. We actually find quite a few trees like this. As you see, the roots go into here. There's not a chance that tree would ever come out of there. You could probably pry that tree out of there and take it home and watch it die. But you know, when you find a tree like this, the best thing to do is just enjoy it for what it is and just leave it there, because it's not going to transplant. What we have here is a Rocky Mountain juniper on a granitic rock outcrop. We're up in the mountains here at about 7,000 feet, a very, very dry area. We got hundreds and hundreds of these, actually millions of these junipers around here. What makes this plant a little bit unusual is that I think this one might actually be able to come out of the rock and be transplanted. In this area, the winds almost never quit. It's not windy right now, but typically the winds will be anywhere from 25 to 50 miles an hour on an almost constant basis. And as you can see, the foliage is kind of ratty looking. That amount of wind and stuff will kill a lot of the tree. It beats the tree up. The foliage looks pretty yellow frequently when you first get them. But what I notice about this tree when I see it is you can tell it's healthy and growing. Even though the foliage is kind of stressed and yellow, it's got these nice blue tips. And here you can see this is, for a juniper in these kind of conditions, that's really vigorous growth for 1 year. That's almost an inch of growth. Most of these branches have got more like 1/8 of an inch of new growth on them for the year. And that's probably really typical. But when I transplant these into my nursery, that's one of the first encouraging signs I look for, is that I'll start seeing little blue tips on the foliage. And generally that's a good sign that the root system is functioning and the tree is actually trying to put on some growth. So now I'm going to poke around the base of these roots here and see what I can figure out whether or not this plant will come out. Now the reason I think it might come out is because it's basically the root system appears to be trapped under this boulder here, this small rock, and if we can pull this back, and won't move it too much, because if the plant doesn't come out, we can just put the rock back and there'll be no harm done. But the first thing we want to do, or the first thing I do looking at a plant like this, is just kind of rake away. There's a lot of old needles, dirt, and duff around the base of this plant, and we kind of want to get that stuff out of the way so that we can see if it's actually got a root system. And if you'll notice, the plant is, in this case, not that firmly attached. I mean, it's rather loose. It may have a root going way back into this crack, and that's what we have to kind of explore here as we try. All right, so cutting away around these roots like that, and a real thin bladed knife like this is real useful to be able to pry underneath stuff. It'll slide in a lot of crevices. You can see this whole thing is it looks like dirt, but actually it's a really fine mat of roots. You can kind of see some of the roots sticking out right here against my fingers. Very, very fine roots. It's all this whole thing, and of course we've got some limber pine roots in here too, and we'll have to, if we decide to take the tree, we'll have to deal with that. But so it looks like we do have a nice, what I would call a really nice, good root pad right around the base of the tree. The next question is as we try to separate this tree from the rock, can we keep it well attached to this root pad so that we can lift the whole thing out as a unit that's still really firmly attached? If we can, our survival will be excellent, just like a potted plant basically. And if we can't, then we've got to decide either whether we want to take a risk on that tree or whether we just want to leave it here and in its natural environment. The smartest approach here would be to try and drive this in here and see what we get. And possibly, if this works, we may be able to put that larger crowbar in there and just kind of muscle that plant out of there. It's kind of hard to get in here, but
you actually have to do a fair amount of research. You have to get a map, find the area where you intend to collect, and find out who's the owner of that land or the manager. You know, if it's a federal agency, you got to find out which federal agency. If it's a national monument, national park, national forest, Bureau of Land Management, reservation, wilderness area, whatever, whoever the manager is, and then you got to talk to them and find out what their regulations are, and it varies a lot. I mean, it's hard for me to give an answer that's going to fit in all different places. I went to a place, a big state park here, where they do log, and I asked for permits to collect trees, and they told me I could not remove live material because of the visual impact. And I thought that made sense, except that they had a timber sale laid out there, and within a matter of about 6 months, all the trees I wanted to collect were, pretty much sawdust. So, the regulations vary a lot, and they're not always what you think they are either. And you really need to check into that so you don't get yourself in trouble. And even more importantly, I don't want bonsai collectors to get a bad name as people that are just out there ripping stuff out of the hills. You want to stay within the law.
I'm trying to cut a root. In fact, I just did cut a root, kind of a big anchor root that was going down into the crevice there. And the idea of that was to see what I'm seeing now as I've worked on this tree here is we've got this pretty good root pad, which is nice and solid, and these are juniper roots, not pine roots. The pine probably, I would assume, runs up the hill there. But so we got a nice pad of juniper roots here, and I've loosened up the tree significantly more than it was. But when I wiggle the tree, the juniper roots are only moving a little bit, which tells me that the root system goes down into the rock and probably pinches off down in there and then comes back up and makes a root pad here, which means that there's an excellent chance that I might be able to get this tree out without the roots. So this is a tree that would be a good one just to back away from.